Zurich's Bahnhofstrasse glittered the way it always had. High-end boutiques, polished tram rails, immaculate facades, but on most mornings no one looked up long enough to notice. People shuffled along as though each shoe were nailed to the pavement. Shoulders sagged. Smiles, once glimpsed in the cafe windows, had thinned to the brightest grey imaginable. Eleanor Weiss kept her gaze low as she crossed Paradeplatz. She had perfected the gait of the modern Zurich citizen, efficient, polite, emotionally hollow. Her reflection in a chocolatier's window looked almost convincing. Dark hair tucked beneath an accountant's beret. Posture stiff with practiced apathy. But behind the disguise, her pulse drummed. Today she would break into the one institution everyone pretended not to believe in. The Schweitzer Emotions Bank, where numbered vaults held the city's missing feelings. She paused at the bronze doors of the bank's marble headquarters. Lion-head knockers guarded an entrance so understated that tourists often photographed sparrows instead. The building's official name, Helvetic Reserve, occupied a single discreet plaque. Only those with training in the empathic arts could sense the other name coiled beneath the metal, like a watermark of malice. Repository of Human Affects, LTPD. Lena inhaled, tasting the absence of joy in the air. Then she slipped inside. Years ago, before vaults and codes, Zurich had hummed with clandestine carnivals. Children painted their faces with leftover pigment from the art college. Couples danced the Limmerquai long after the street lamps dimmed. And Alina, a novice empath, walked through crowds picking up frequencies of wonder as easily as scents from a bakery. She believed emotions were music and everyone a living violin. But financiers had discovered a darker symphony. The first extraction occurred during a recession. Joy converted into spectral condensate, stored for future stability. A consortium of banks realized how profitable scarcity could become. Why peddle luxury goods when you could sell the very feeling of contentment by the gram? Publicly, they laughed off rumors of bottled happiness. Privately, they erected vaults and hired specialists, empaths like Elena, to refine their product. The year she turned 27, she was assigned to room 19, charged to stillets. Her job: separate strands of elation, serenity, and playfulness drawn, illicitly, invisibly, from concerts, birthday parties, even maternity wards. The decision to quit came the day she processed a burst of carnival glee from a 4-year-old boy. The joy had tasted of spun sugar, brass bands, and future possibilities. By the time the machines finished with it, the colour dulled to corporate pastel. Alina left that night, abandoning a salary large enough to purchase a lakeside villa, if only villas still came with garden laughter. She went underground, gathering rumours, allies, and guilt. Each week the city grew duller until even her own mother's chuckle sounded pre-recorded. A revolt was required, but protests would merely be anaesthetised. The system specialised in converting outrage to fear and hope to resignation. A surgical strike on the vaults, however, returning pure joy to the populace, might ignite what speeches could not. So Alina planned a heist. Inside the bank foyer, she headed for the employees-only turnstiles. A rented messenger satchel bumped her hip, filled with forged invoices and a very real letter of reinstatement, countersigned by Ramon Schweikel, Chief Director of Emotional Liquidity. The signature was genuine. She had stolen it years ago, pressing a sympathetic microthread under Schweikel's pen during her exit interview. Empathy taught you things about pressure points, both physical and psychological. The guard scanned the letter, then Eleanor's iris, a half-centimetre film lifted off her eyeball, a lens saturated with ambient disinterest. The scanner greenlit. She walked through while trying not to sense the guard's flicker of suspicion. It died quickly. Having one's fears bled on a daily basis kept initiative low. She rode an elevator 5 floors down, heart swinging like the carriage cables. Every detail of her plan existed in triplicate. The technical schematics she had stolen, the emotional cartography of each corridor she had memorized, and the improvisational jazz of uncertainty. When the doors opened, she entered a hallway of granite and hush. Surveillance lenses bloomed like midnight flowers on the ceiling, but they were designed to detect irregular emotional spikes, not motives. Elena summoned a memory of waiting rooms and stale coffee, flattening her inner signature. A woman in a charcoal suit approached. "Courier?" "Yes, ma'am." "Batch 7 Alpha from Basel Refinery." Elena offered an embossed crate. Inside, instead of invoiced duplicates, lay 3 sealed ampules containing raw desolation. She had harvested it from an abandoned asylum the previous week. Bank protocol required testing of any inbound substance protocol she intended to weaponize. The woman nodded toward a frosted doorway. "Through there, inspection chamber 2. "Appreciate it." Elena stepped inside the chamber as the door sealed behind her. A plexiglass cylinder awaited, rimmed with gold electrodes. Placing the crate inside would trigger analysis that took 93 seconds. During that window, a fail-safe shutter locked the door. No one would watch her. Technicians supervised from a remote booth, trusting sensors. There was mistake 1. Elena slid the crate into the cylinder, punched the activation icon, and simultaneously knelt to the floor grate. From the messenger bag, she produced a slender device, a tuning fork of cobalt and bone. She struck it against her knee. Soundless vibrations rippled, cancelling the submissive apathy she had worn, surfacing her real feeling, determined compassion, tuned precisely at 528 heats. The bank's effective monitors read it as a minor seismic blip. But inside the grate, micro servos wired to detect dormant empathy came online. Years earlier, Elena had hidden them there during a shift, programming them to unlatch the chamber lock if they ever sensed her unique harmonic. The grate hinges coughed. She lifted the panel, lowered herself into a crawl space of cables and dust, and pulled the grate shut above her just as red lights flashed. The analysis system had met desolation so unfiltered it overloaded. Sirens howled. Sprinklers vented neutralizing foam. "Smoke for the eyes," Eleanor thought, "while I disappear." The crawl space fed into a maintenance shaft, sharing a wall with Vault-tier Dre. She inched along until she reached a vertical chute. According to schematics, it aligned directly behind Vault 713, codenamed Sonenkern Core of Sun, where the city's distilled joy, extracted over the last decade, resided. Officially, Sonenkern was a myth used to frighten junior account managers. Misfile a client's despair and we'll assign you to 713, see how long your sanity lasts. In truth, employees needed to believe joy was hermetically secured. If they suspected it was distributed among numbered lockboxes like ordinary wealth, leaks would proliferate. So management condensed all joy into one place and surrounded it with fear. Fear manifested here as sentinels, quasi-solid constructs woven from panic and obedience. Eleanor's friend Yusuf had mapped their patrol routes using acoustic echolocation disguised as subway busking. According to his notes, 2 sentinels slithered the corridor every 80 seconds. They sensed heartbeats faster than 110 BPM and dopamine spikes above baseline. Eleanor's own heart pounded at 126. She exhaled, pressing thumb and forefinger to her wrist. Years of empath training had taught her to surf emotions like windsurfers ride gusts, tilt the mast or drown. She pictured the grieving mother she'd soothed last winter, the calm she had offered. Her pulse sank to a meditative 88. Popping a vent panel, she slipped into an alcove opposite Vault 713. The vault door looked mundane brist steel, rotary wheel, biometric cradle. Embedded above the cradle was a cameo portrait in antique brass, her father's face. Herr Dr. Marcus Weiss, chief architect of effective containment. He had posed decades ago, before wrinkles, before unslept nights, designing moral grey areas. Elena touched the brass, feeling heat not entirely her own. She hadn't spoken to Marcus in 3 years, ever since their argument on the Quabrica. He'd insisted the bank simply quarantine volatile emotions for public safety. She'd retorted that safety without ecstasy was just postponement of living. She drew the heart key from her satchel, a gem-like tool forged by Mara, a former metals analyst who now distilled activism into alloys. The key resembled a hummingbird. Long beak, wings spread. Each feather bore etchings of chord progressions, Joy's own sheet music. Elena slotted the beak into the biometric cradle. Instead of reading her fingerprint, the cradle tasted for the emotion encoded in the metal. Joy recognized itself, circuits clicked, and the wheel unlocked with a sigh. Within, luminous globes floated like soap bubbles the size of fists. Thousands. Sunlight refracted through a stained glass window cast rainbows across them, turning the chamber into a kaleidoscope of childhood mornings and alpine meadows after snowfall. The Joy hummed, a chorus of kites, puppies, first kisses, fireworks, solved equations, and parental pride. The sound was so beautiful that, for a moment, Elena trembled. She had prepared for guards and lasers, not for awe. Focus. She released a silvered satchel from her belt woven with porous filaments to keep Joy stable, then stared into the nearest orb. A memory formed, hers yet larger. The day Zurich's Lakeside Festival launched simultaneous paper lanterns, and the sky looked like a living galaxy. She felt herself inside that memory, lantern heat warming cheeks, crowd cheering. The sensation was contagious. If she lingered, she might drown in it forever. Gently, she coaxed orbs into the satchel. 50, then 100. Each orb kissed her palms with childhood giddiness. When the bag held as much as safety allowed, she cinched it. The globes dimmed to firefly glows. Time. She turned and saw her father. Marcus Waste stood in the doorway. Hair silver, coat immaculate, eyes lined by sleepless nights. "I wondered how long until you came," he said, voice a cello string scraping. Elena's breath snagged. "Move aside, Papa." "Returning stolen property by stealing it again?" He shook his head. "Idealism suits you, but consequences do not." "The city is dying," she snapped. "Look outside. No songs, no laughter. You did that." "I safeguarded society from volatility. Remember the riots of 14? The heartbreak suicides? Unregulated emotion is dynamite. An absence of it is suffocation." She clenched the satchel. "You taught me empathy, then used it to vacuum souls." Marcus sighed. "The board will descend any moment. Sentinels already converge. Give me the bag. I'll claim a containment breach and spare you prison." Elena scanned his eyes brown flecked with ember. Empathy let her feel the shape of another's pulse. What throbbed in Marcus was not malice but weariness, and a kernel of doubt. Like moss finding light between stones. "My bag holds only a fraction," she said carefully. "You know that. Let me release this much. See what happens. And if people riot again, maybe they celebrate instead." She reached into the satchel, withdrew a single orb, and offered it. "Taste what you've locked away." He hesitated as though the orb might bite, then cupped it. Light spilled between his fingers, painting his cheeks golden. A low gasp escaped him. The helpless sound a man makes when meeting wonder for the first time in years. The orb pulsed brighter, attuned to his thawing. Scenes flickered across his expression. The day Elena first rode a bicycle, her mother's eyes, the night they met, the smell of rain on cedar shutters. The orb burst, not violently, but like a seed releasing dandelions. The pollen drifted through Marcus, through Elena, seeped into the hallway. A sentinel rounding the corner paused mid-glide. The Joy touched its architecture of fear and unraveled it into harmless vapor. Marcus stared, tears graphing lines down his face. "Go," he whispered. "I'll delay them." Eleanor pressed her forehead to his, gratitude infusing her tone. "Thank you." Then she sprinted. Phase 2 of her plan relied on the city's veins, fountains and canals feeding the limit. Joy in gaseous microform, released at crisscrossing water nodes, would aerosolize above tram stops and rooftops. She had seeded diffusers all week, capillary wicks hidden under lion spouts, along culverts, inside cafe flower boxes. Now she needed only to prime them. Exiting through the carriage dock, she vaulted a railing onto Bahnhofstrasse. Afternoon crowds parted sluggishly. No alarm, yet either Marcus kept his word or the bank still processed the chamber explosion. She jogged toward Berkeleyplatz, where Lake Zurich kissed the quay. Snow clouds gathered. The city's color palette hovered between pewter and sleep. Perfect cover. At the lakeside, she met Luca, the teenage drone smith who considered law's latency issues. He lounged on a bench, goggles pushed to his brow. "Cargo confirmed?" he asked. Elena handed him the satchel. "Prime the fountains eastward. I'll handle the west." Luca donned the goggles and whooped. 4 swallow-sized drones launched from his backpack, claws gripping joy globes. They buzzed across the water, scattering reflections like broken glass. Elena hurried north along the promenade, depositing globes into diffuser pods disguised as emergency life rings. With each drop, she whispered, "Frei sein. Be free." The globes liquefied, wicking through absorbent mesh. By the time church bells tolled 5, mist coiled from every fountain, glimmering faintly. Commuters waiting for trams inhaled and blinked, as though realizing they had been underwater, lungs aching for oxygen, now surfacing at last. A businessman near Sechsele-Lutenplatz laughed into his phone, really laughed, barking and wheezing. A grandmother hummed a lullaby she'd forgotten. Teenagers high-fived strangers. The transformation spread like dawn. Elena stood at Münsterbrücke, watching ripples of color bloom across stone buildings. She felt the city exhale centuries of pent-up yearning. Somewhere behind her, sirens wailed toward the bank, but they sounded off-key, ridiculous. She almost collapsed from relief, but the job wasn't done. Joy restored without balance could tilt manic. People also needed resilience, calm, courage, emotional homeostasis. She'd fetch those later. Tonight demanded celebration. A shout rose from the lakefront. Someone had lit paper lanterns. Dozens lifted into the overcast sky, pressing against clouds as though searching for forgotten stars. Strangers linked arms to watch. Elena tasted roasted chestnuts and possibility. Mara found her on the bridge, cheeks flushed. "Look," she said, pointing south. Across the city, church steeples rang improvised melodies, bells tolling, out of sync but somehow perfect, like languages discovering a common chorus. Elena closed her eyes, letting the sound fill her. She could sense Marcus somewhere in Paradeplatz, witnessing the tide he'd helped unleash. Perhaps he felt terror of consequences. But overshadowing that, she hoped, was relief. The dynamite he'd locked away had always been meant to illuminate, not destroy. Mara nudged her. "City's waking means more work." "I know," Elena said, "but let's give them one night." They joined the swelling crowd on the plaza. Music erupted. Accordions, beatboxes, someone plucking a cello borrowed from a conservatory window. Children danced, stomping puddles of melted snow. Laughter ricocheted off tramcars, up glass facades, into the winter sky. Elena spotted one of Luca's drones zip overhead, releasing its final orb. It burst like confetti, sunlight bottled in a raindrop. A shard splashed onto her cheek, warm as July. She licked it, tasted childhood. For a sliver of eternity, the city existed outside any ledger. Bankers might rebuild vaults, laws might stiffen, sentinels might evolve. But tonight, Zurich remembered how to feel. And that memory, once rebooted, was virally persistent. Elena breathed in, letting empathy flow outward, blending with thousands of heartbeats. Not control, connection. She'd set out to steal joy back for the people, but joy, once freed, was stealing her right back, weaving her pulse into the city's symphony. Somewhere a voice began to sing, rough, unsure, contagious. Another joined, and another. Soon the entire square rang with wordless melody older than mountains. Elena added her alto, eyes shining at lantern galaxies. She felt the music climb cathedral towers, sweep across rooftop gardens, echo through the alley behind the Emotions Bank where perhaps Marcus listened. She pictured him removing the brass portrait from Vault 713 and slipping it into his coat, a keepsake of a world he would now help rebuild. Snowflakes drifted, catching lamplight like sparks from a hearth. The populace raised faces into the swirling glow. They weren't afraid of volatility now. They were dancing inside it. And for the first time in too many winters, Zurich looked less like a museum of wealth and more like a living heart, pumping colour through a network of stone veins. Alina let her eyes close, palms open to the sky, and whispered a vow half prayer, half blueprint, to safeguard this fragile resurgence. Because bankers could corner markets, police could cordon streets. But no one, not even her father's architects, could grade a wall high enough to imprison joy once a city remembered how to share it. Not when empathy itself had mastered the art of the ultimate heist, making every citizen both the thief and the accomplice, stealing back what had always been theirs.